Hi. Let's examine the interval of a fourth in this session. As guitarists, we're pretty familiar with fourths because the instrument is tuned primarily in fourths, with the exception of the second and third strings, which are tuned in thirds. All of the rest of the strings sets are tuned in fourths. So we're used to that sound of a fourth. Now, a fourth interval is called a perfect fourth. Let's look at the key of C and see examine the interval of a fourth. In the key of C would be C to F. Let's count the half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, it's 5 half steps or 2.5 whole steps is the interval of a perfect fourth. Again, we know the sound of it from hearing it so much in tuning, but many songs are use that interval a lot. It's easy to remember. Here Comes the Bride. At football games, they and basketball, and then everybody screams "charge." So that starts with a perfect fourth interval down. The interval lays out really well on the guitar because on all the string sets except 2 and 3, the fingers, the notes are in the same fret, and you get a lot of that fourth sound. Some people say it sounds a little bit oriental. On the inside strings, the second and third, it's that little diagonal shape. So that's the sound of the shape of the fourth interval, the perfect fourth. We've examined then what it is, how many half steps, how it sounds, and how it feels. You can also get it on one string, although it requires quite a stretch. There's a fourth. Down in this area of the neck, it's very difficult to make that stretch if you have smaller hands. I don't have very big hands, so some players do. They have giant hands, and they can do it. Obviously, as you go up the fretboard where the frets get closer together, the interval becomes more accessible to you, and that sound of trilling is available. The other interval that's involved in the fourth is called an augmented fourth. Augments normally means to enhance something. In music, it means to raise, in effect, to sharpen something. So on the perfect interval of a fourth, if we knew that was C to F, excuse me, then we know that if we raise the F to F sharp or G flat, then we get the augmented fourth. Now the augmented fourth has, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that because we'll talk about it in the interval of a fifth. It's a diminished fifth as well. In other words, it's an interval in between the fourth and the fifth can be looked at as a diminished fifth or an augmented fourth, raising the fourth or lowering the fifth. The other name for it is the tritone. And the tritone is a good name because then it doesn't get into whether you're thinking about it or what have you about whether it's a diminished fifth or a raised fourth. There are various rules about that. We'll look at that some in the future, but a tritone is a good way to get around the political incorrectness, if you will, of the interval. We all know that sound. It's very considered the most dissonant, the devil's interval, etc. The other thing that the tritone does is it splits the octave, E to E, it splits it exactly in half. It is the midpoint between the two notes of the octave. So it's an interesting note that way, in that it splits the octave exactly in half. So that's the interval of a fourth. Pretty familiar to us as guitarists because our instrument is tuned that way. In the future we'll look at chord construction in fourths. It's very popular. You can stack fourths instead of thirds and get all kinds of neat chord sounds. But for today, we're just looking at the interval itself of the perfect fourth, 5 half steps, 2 1/2 whole steps, and the augmented fourth.